It's time for our African View debate here on the Move, and it's always quite interesting. Very interesting now how, everything is said to be green. We all want to be green. What does this term green even mean? That means that we're trying to, become a more sustainable world. We're trying to make sure that we can be in this world for a little bit longer, and we can sort of, take back some of the impacts of, global warming here on the continent and the entire world. We are seeing the everyday impacts now of global warming. I remember back in primary school when they spoke about one day there's going to be global warming. I thought it was something that was so far-fetched and I was never going to experience in my lifetime. But hey, we're seeing it now. Places that were never hot are now, burning hot. Places that were never cold have snow. We're seeing floods and rains and all sorts of natural disasters taking place every day. So how do we contribute? Because the ads are saying, hey, we can all do things to contribute to green living. Is it actually something we can contribute in, especially with green living as a very commercialized thing that's been taking place, from recycling to solar panels? Is green living practical for us to change to? Or is it a privileged lifestyle? That's the conversation and the debate topic that we're having this morning on the African View. And to help us unpack this particular one is Kabelo Matlobukhwane, who's a public speaker, education activist, and democracy and social justice champion. Mfundo Ntandane is also part of this debate, macro level social worker and a scholar. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us in today's African View debate. I'm going to start with you, Kabelo. Let's hear what your thoughts are in this particular one. Is green living practical for, the average person to change to, or is it a privileged lifestyle?
Thank you so much for having me today. I think for me, I believe that green living is not a privileged lifestyle, but it is a practical change that can and actually should be accessible to all. So, for example, when as individuals, we make very small adjustments to our everyday life, like deciding to recycle, to conserve energy, or maybe choosing to walk to work or to school or use public transport, we save a lot of energy, we save a lot of the environment of a lot of toxicity. And these steps can not only save us money, but they can create healthier habits in communities. For example, in South Africa, where we currently have problems of water or load shedding, these are real challenges that are facing the people. But these choices also on how we deal with these things ease the pressure on our strain system. If we decide to find alternatives, healthy, green living alternatives, we are able to ease the strain on our systems, but also find better ways and responsible ways for people to be able to survive and to empower those people to contribute meaningfully to their daily lives. Because as contrary to popular belief, green living is not only about governments of business, but it's about us as individuals, because we are the ones that are affected at the end of the day by the decisions we make.
Mfundo, let's get you into this debate. I'm sure you're going to be arguing the other side. What's your take?
Yes, thank you, my brother. It's so funny that we used to study about it in school as something that is far-fetched, but it's here now. And unfortunately, we were not very much prepared, for it. As such, the many sustainable, options, such as the organic food, the solar panels, the eco-friendly, product that we are supposed to use, to adapt, to the green living, standard that is required to address the issue of, climate change, remains, an outreach for the low and the middle, income household that we have, or rather the poor, segment or part of the population, So, and this equates the green living to a 21st century developmental grade, which is subsequential to urban settlement only, because it is, a lifestyle that do correspond to their socioeconomic, a grade, compared to other settlements where there is poverty, where people, are struggling, to make ends meet. So when you tell them them about, solar, these are things that are far, from them, so unlike the urban settlements, where their economic statuses, or great, predisposes them to green lifestyle, so that's.
All right, let's come back to you, Kabelo. Some of the widely advertised ways of green living, as Mfundo has mentioned, are things that cost money. Does green have to mean that I have to take money out of my pocket to contribute to the green world?
So green living doesn't have to mean organic food or expensive solar panels. It can simply be as simple as reducing plastic waste in the community, or running a community recycling project, or installing basic water-saving devices. The costs, these are cost-saving practical steps that ordinary people in households can be able to adapt. I do actually acknowledge that corporations and governments must carry the bulk of the responsibility in terms of services that they should provide, like electricity and all of those things. And I do actually also see that greenwashing and class privilege do exist. But I don't believe that these are reasons to dismiss green living as impractical, because on the contrary, the individuals and communities can adopt sustainable practices, they can normalize eco-conscious behavior and inspire market demand. They can also place pressure on governments to create systematic change. What we don't realize as community members, especially South Africans, is that we have the power to dictate what kind of policies we want to see in our communities, in our government, in our businesses. Businesses work on a simple model in economics that is called supply and demand. Wherever there is no demand, there's no business that will be forced to supply something that is not demanded. So green living does not have to be a system of exclusion. It can be an equalizer, whereby solutions that can be designed by communities to be accessible and to be much more affordable in communities can be advocated for by the communities themselves. For example, this is the philosophy behind my own work in the company that I run currently, which is called the Marking Up Africa. We went to schools, we found that it's going to be expensive for schools to use technology and adapt technology. So we built an app that works with currently existing devices and scanners to be able to mark and return test papers. So what we do now, instead of wasting papers in schools where we don't know where the tests end up, instead of having to buy expensive technologies, we developed an app that still works with the same models, but helps to reduce this waste on the environment. So by designing innovations for real communities that show impact, it doesn't have to come at a low cost. It can actually be from the community itself. The problem is that we always expect it to come from some people who are elites or from some people in government, when those people don't even face the problems that we talk about here. So the communities that are facing these problems need to start looking at themselves as the creators of solutions and build solutions that they know can work for them, but in the long run can also work for the environments that we exist in.
Okay, it's a very interesting debate indeed. Is green living practical change, or is it for the privileged few? We'll continue the African View debate after this break.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. 9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the Move with Palesa and Benjamin Moshatama.
Intriguing countering views from our guests. We're joined by Mfundo Ntandane, macro-level social worker and scholar. Kabelo Mahlobo joins us as well, public speaker, education activist, and democracy and social justice champion. And they're arguing this theme today, which is looking at green living. Is it practical, or is it a privileged lifestyle? Speaking for this is Kabelu saying, you know what, we can do it, while Mfundo said it is for the privileged few. Mfundo, it seems like, you are being countered here in terms of the practicality of green living, because I think Kabelo is right to a large degree. It does not take much to recycle and reduce waste.
Yeah, very true, my brother. Not to dispute what Kabelo is saying entirely, but we need to look at the participants to this, response. So the narratives that Kabelo has raised, such as putting green living as being the only solution to mitigate, the effect of climate change on the planet, it often puts, the burden of responsibility on individual, while taking away the responsibility from corporations and the government, who causes the bulk of the emission, and this, relieves the suspicion that, always existed, that the government always pushes it makes it looks like the government is pushing the interest of certain privileged elites down to the throat of other people through guilt, because come to think of it, these narratives about the devastating effect of climate change and green life being the solution is quickly catching up with the ordinary individuals on the ground, and who are not keeping up, with the understanding what exactly we are getting to in here, and then it's putting them, into a panic mode, and then on that very panic mode, when now you are emphasizing that green life, it's the only way, without considering the questions of affordability and adaptability, it looks the quest for green living as an arrogant stance, from one group of people who can readily afford and who are made, ready, economically and socially, to adapt to this. And now it looks like it is put on the other people who are still struggling, on the ground, So
yeah,
that's
that's a good countering point there, Mfundo. Kabelo, what's your take on that? Because it is true, the biggest emitters are big business. Why must we, the small people on the ground, take that responsibility?
Well, it's a very interesting argument, which is actually true. Communities actually, especially those with fewer resources, have long practiced sustainability out of survival, not out of status. So rather than us saying we should stop now and join those that are destroying the environment, why don't we continue living by the ethics and the morals, while at the time holding leaders accountable? Governments hold the biggest responsibility together with corporations, and we need to demand systematic change. But we cannot ignore the fact that we have been doing good in our communities, and we cannot advocate for a change in the good that we've been doing. Instead, let's hold them accountable while continuing to do what we have been doing. We have been living sustainably. Actually, in terms of the whole world, Africa contributes less than 10% to the emissions that we see in the world. Number one is the USA, number two is China. So we, as Africa, should be leading the conversation globally through our leaders to say, we demand accountability from these countries that are destroying the planet, and not having conversations internally to destroy the planet and help those that are destroying it. I think we need to not confuse the two. We have been doing great, we are doing great, but why don't we say, let's hold those that are destroying accountable instead of us saying, let's just leave it because it's not for us, it's for the rich.
Well,
Because the rich are destroying communities and the poor are actually protecting the environment.
Well, I'm glad that you came up with that, because we just got a question on WhatsApp saying, but don't rural people live green already? Is city living is the problem? Do we say that poverty essentially is green living? Because a lot of people who are poor cannot afford most of the things that emit, some of these, unsustainable practices. Like they don't have a car, they have to walk. It doesn't particularly mean they are being intentionally green. They can't afford some food, so they have to plant. It doesn't mean that they're being intentionally green. Whereas if you are someone who lives in the city trying to get more opportunities, trying to of course make money and get out of poverty, you're going to start emitting more of those unsustainable practices simply because of your location. So who should be taking that impact of green living? Are we saying that poverty is good because it is green, or should people not want to get out of poverty, but essentially that getting out of poverty and moving into the urban areas and into the cities makes them less green?
Well, actually, I'm not saying that poverty is green living. Poverty is hardship. It's not a lifestyle or a choice. But what I'm saying is that communities with fewer resources have often had to adopt practices of reuse, to repair, and to conserve out of survival.
Yes.
That shows in its own, it's an example that sustainable living can be simple and affordable. It is not necessarily as expensive as we want it to be, but it should never be confused with poverty itself. For example, there's something that was introduced now in the camping lifestyle, which is called glamping. Glamping is when you still are camping, but you introduce a lot of comforts that make people want to do this more. So camping and glamping are both ways of sustainable living. They're not hotels with buildings that destroy trees. They happen within those communities. But they are one good example that it doesn't have to be proper. It doesn't have to be that now you have to shower with a bucket. You can bring your own shower, but put it in a way that protects the environment. That's why I'm saying us people who've been living in these communities that have been doing this thing can be an example to those that are living in cities to say, well, I'm living in a rural community. I don't have a wall around my house. I live with animals.
Sure.
I have a tent, but I'm still able to live comfortably.
Okay.
Let us advocate for it. Let us be the example
Okay.
to those that don't know how this thing is done.
All right, Mfundo, your final sentiments on this discussion. Give us your thoughts in 30 seconds. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. Mfundo, are you there? Not sure if we still have Mfundo there. Then we'll leave it there in our discussion. That was intriguing, wasn't it, Bali?
Yeah, absolutely. There are valid points on
From
both
both
sides
sides.
of this discussion. And it is true that green living is possible, but also, is it something that a lot of people are thinking about consciously, or is it just by, circumstantial that you're being green?
Hey, join us on this debate. Become one of the debaters on this one. Which side do you take? Remember, our WhatsApp number is +2763 406 9126. You can text us and voice note us. What do you think about this one? Is living green practical, or is it a privileged lifestyle? Give us your thoughts on this one.